Hey everyone, and welcome to this great event talking about fraud and viewability. And we're joined here for our first chat with someone who some have called the godmother of 3MS, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But Sherrill Mane, who runs the show at the IAB on research for a number of years, is here to talk about differentiating fraud and viewability and a lot of the initiatives that the IAB has put forth and a lot of the progress. So first, I counted in the last week alone 12 different news articles or op-ed pieces in the top 6 trade pubs around fraud and or viewability. And I used to work in the same building with this guy, Nate Silver, who wrote this book called The Signal and the Noise. So help us with a little bit of signal and noise. And it seems like with so much attention properly focused in these two areas, it's usually best to do a little bit of definition building first, since there are a lot of newer folks coming into this space. So help us understand where the IAB defines fraud and viewability, and then we'll talk about some of the efforts going on.
Well, it's really important, and I'm glad you're giving me this opportunity to speak out on the topic. It's really important that we separate viewability as a measurement construct from fraud. That doesn't mean there's no overlap. There likely is. You can have viewable impressions that are fraudulent. What is particularly disturbing about the noise is that the distinction between the two is not being made correctly. The danger to the reputation of the industry as a whole is massive when this level of confusion and noise is maintained. Viewability simply refers to exposure, the opportunity for a consumer to see an ad that renders. It's really as simple as that. It is complex to implement because we are changing technologies and we are changing measurement systems. Fraud, on the other hand, is something really nefarious, something that should not be happening, and something that we as an industry have to work on. And we also have to, I believe, stop pushing the panic button and talking about wildly disparate numbers of how many impressions are fraudulent. I'm not sure where the truth lies, but I can say that it seems that everyone's panicking and no one's really putting proper science around what is fraud, how do you detect it, how do you eradicate it. But it is certainly not part and parcel of viewability.
So I know we have some folks in the audience and coming up a little bit later that would love to weigh in on the science and planting a flag on where their numbers are. But let's focus on 3MS and a lot of the initiatives there, which has really been your baby for a long time. Give us a quick history lesson around how it came about, what the problem is that this is trying to solve, and then the progress that's been made just in the last few months, really.
3MS was born of a need expressed primarily by brand marketers for comparable metrics that would allow and facilitate the movement of media weight and dollars to where consumers are going. Meaning, there was a sense that brand marketers are being inundated with myriad plethora of metrics, but yet those metrics somehow don't line up to the ways that they have thought about media, thought about brand impact of advertising campaigns, and they couldn't count across all of the media that they are buying. So there was a sense that digital is giving them a lot, but there's so much of it that doesn't work together with other media. And that was really the birth of 3MS. And the birth of viewability was in the first guiding principle that all of the folks across the ecosystem came up with. And when I say ecosystem, I'm going to back up again, because 3MS was a joint initiative, a collaboration of the Association of National Advertisers, the 4As, and the IAB.
Basically everybody.
Basically everyone,
yeah.
Marketers, agencies, and sellers. And so that's another great opportunity that you've given me to set the record straight. It is not an IAB initiative. After we went through the work, and the work was done by teams of executives from across the ecosystem. It wasn't like people from the IAB sat down in a room with people from the 4As and the ANA and said, okay, we want viewability. It was literally hard work of teams of executives, business leaders, ops executives, research people, media planners, really across the whole ecosystem, CMOs. We said, gee, how do we make this concept of equivalizing media and counting across in a way that brands can use? How do we make it real? So the first one was, you have to have an opportunity to see. So you must go from served impression to a viewable impression. Viewable does not mean someone sat and was enchanted by it. It merely means it rendered on a screen.
So let's question about apples to apples comparisons then. So when we were doing a little bit of prep, we had remembered that we actually used to work in the same building together a couple years ago at Turner Broadcasting Sales, CNN and everything else back in the pre-Netscape 1.0 days, let's just call it. And so I'm curious about the comparisons between television today, linear, and its new evolving forms, and this initiative. When you talk about the opportunity to be seen, it's always challenging to do apples to apples because, I've been a part of a lot of initiatives where for maybe 6-7 years now, as the rise of digital video has taken off, folks in digital understandably kind of pound the table and politely say, gee, that $70 billion that we constantly know about happening in the upfronts around now, gee, that we should be getting more in that. Look at the eyeball move. Look at the reach and frequency we're getting. But from a measurement standpoint, it always seems challenging to line up and balance apples to apples with what brands, as you said, top agencies who have been buying television for 50+ years and are pretty comfortable with what those measurement standards have been, notwithstanding the C7 announcement this week. But how's that balance going in terms of people realizing, all right, we need to line up our standards the same way as television versus, no, we're digital. We can do so many things better. It should be this and that. Where's that now?
In the development of the guiding principles of making measurement make sense, there was a very clear understanding that digital is different in many ways. All media and all advertising must have the opportunity to be seen. How you measure impact can vary. The types of impacts can vary. So part of 3MS does say there are metrics that are unique to digital advertising, that are unique to understanding the impact for brand building, that we have to define clearly, and we have to measure in a way that meets a standard that is methodologically sound, that is transparent, and that is consistent. But before you get there, you have to have some basic counting functions in place that are comparable. They can't be exactly alike. So for example, you asked me about television, and you mentioned C7. Television suffers from something that is called average commercial minute ratings. So first, in the old days when we worked in the same building,
yes,
you posted as meaning you got a rating from Nielsen for a program.
Yeah.
And every commercial in that program got the same rating. Even though everyone knew there was two now.
And we would buy, when I was at BBDO doing upfronts, we would negotiate pod position a lot of times with beginning of the show, end of the show type stuff, right. Kind of like almost the pre-rolled, right. Post-roll stuff now, right?
Right, because there was an understanding that pod position could influence how many people were actually able to see it because they maybe hadn't changed the channel yet, maybe hadn't left the room yet.
Right.
There are many factors, but the fundamental rendering on a screen was always there and was never questioned. So average commercial minute ratings is a big leap forward for television because it takes into account just the commercial airtime and not the programming. But they're still not doing commercial ratings per commercial. Whereas for digital, we do have the capacity. We are, in fact, measuring, when you go with viewable, you are measuring the viewable impression for the ad.
So isn't one of the major audiences of 3MS and the viewability initiatives the media planners at big agencies who are divvying up the pie on their calendar or fiscal basis, saying this is going to go to digital, this is going to go to television, because so many agencies still operate that way and silo their budgets? Isn't a lot of that to get at them before the upfronts even start, to be able to say, like, you should probably move a slice over here?
Right, you're absolutely right. The notion of GRPs and my friend Josh over there has heard me say this. I don't love GRPs, and I've participated in many of the debates throughout the industry about the value of them. But what they are is they are a counting mechanism, and they allow you to put all your apples together as opposed to having people look at apples and pears and cherries and oranges. So in terms that you were referring to earlier, the planning cycle, yes, there are still some ways of planning that happen early in the year, and if people who are doing video planning across screens are looking at how many reach points they need in order to build awareness, introduce a new brand, break through, then clearly if you can't be counted the same way, you wind up being shortchanged on the allocation. So that was a fundamental premise, was marketers know that consumers are going to digital media. That isn't a question that they have. The question is, how do they put it together? Because the reality is, they're not going to suddenly stop buying TV. So they're going to put all their media together, and they're going to try to do it in a way that works for their brand and their brand strategy.
Makes sense. All right, so a final question about how this has been progressing. And so this question represents a few folks that have said, oh, you're talking to Sherrill? You need to ask her this. So a question about the pendulum swing of doing this for positive reinforcement and being able to put more money in digital, obviously, and part of the reasons for the initiative that we talked about, and some of the potential downside of shining a spotlight maybe a little too close for some folks. So how has that been going in the last, again, just handful of months in terms of people who are saying, geez, we were kind of doing just fine with our plus 20% increases every single year, and now I'm hearing, these are others, again, Prasika Consulting talks to everybody, but others have said to me, please ask her about how the IAB sees, do you see more people today saying, gosh, this is now a concern, I may ease off the gas a little bit in digital, more than people who are saying, boy, I've been a little more on the sidelines with my 5 to 10%. Oh, this is great now, it's getting closer to apples, here's 30%. Where is that balance today in terms of net gain, if you will, for digital?
Okay, I think it's too soon to tell where the net gain is. You've asked me how the last 3 months have been, and what I can say is the MRC lifted the advisory on trading using measurements of viewable impressions for display advertising. That was March 31st. My understanding from the marketplace, and I have had agency folks in and publishers and people from a variety of disciplines come in to do 3MS educational forums at the IAB. My understanding is it's a tough implementation process. There are challenges, but I'm also hearing from publishers it's a great opportunity to redesign. It's a great opportunity to rethink how selling is conducted. It is another wonderful opportunity to break through the myth of below the fold doesn't matter and it's worthless, because guess what? If you can measure viewability, it turns out that in many cases it's not worthless and it shouldn't be devalued. So there's a fundamental restructuring of how you do business, and I believe that as supply is constrained and demand has to go up because there's more consumption, that all of these things will even out, and that those who can provide better inventory, meaning more viewable to a higher degree, will wind up being able to segment inventory, charge more, but we don't see that just yet. What we're hearing is experimental, quote unquote, deals, which have been happening probably for the last year or so, have done very well and have commanded higher prices.